The grand wedding hall shimmered with gold and crystal, filled with the world's elite, royalty, billionaires, and high-ranking officials. The air buzzed with whispers of admiration as the beautiful Western bride, Emily, stood beside her husband, Khalid, the powerful Arab millionaire known for his wealth and his ruthless nature. But, in an instant, the fairy tale shattered. A sharp, deafening slap echoed through the palace. The crowd gasped. Women covered their mouths in shock. Emily staggered back, her cheek burning red, but she didn't cry, she didn't scream. Instead, she lifted her head and smiled. What just happened? Why did Khalid strike his bride in front of hundreds of guests? And more importantly, why did Emily's reaction send shivers down everyone's spine? This wasn't just a wedding. This was a battlefield. And the real war was just beginning. Power, wealth, respect. Khalid had it all. The name Khalid al-Fayez wasn't just known, it was feared. A man who built his empire from the ground up, a man who commanded entire industries with just a glance, a man whose word was law. And yet, despite all his power, all his control, there was one thing he had never been able to conquer: love. And now, as he stood in front of his bride, the woman he had once sworn was his destiny, he had done the unthinkable. He had struck her, in public, in front of hundreds of guests who had gathered not just to celebrate, but to witness the union of two worlds, East and West, tradition and modernity, raw power and untamed beauty. But what no one knew was that this slap wasn't just an act of anger, it was a reaction to something much deeper, a betrayal, a deception. A secret whispered into Khalid's ear just moments before he stood at the altar. A secret that poisoned his mind, twisted his heart, and made his blood boil with an uncontrollable rage. But let's rewind, let's go back to where it all began, before the diamonds, before the scandal, before the moment that would change both their lives forever. Khalid had always been a man of discipline. Raised in a world where emotions were a weakness and hesitation meant death in the world of business, he had never known what it meant to truly trust someone. Everyone wanted something from him, his money, his power, his name. And yet, when he met Emily, something changed. She wasn't like the women who threw themselves at him, the ones who batted their eyelashes and whispered sweet lies into his ear, hoping to become his wife. No. Emily had been different. She had challenged him, defied him, made him feel something he hadn't felt in years. She was beautiful, yes, stunning even, the kind of woman who could turn heads in any room. But that wasn't what made her dangerous, no. It was her mind, her wit, her ability to look him in the eye and make him question everything he had ever believed about himself. And that made her irresistible. Their relationship had been a whirlwind, passionate, intense, a firestorm of desire and conflict. Khalid had never met a woman who dared to challenge him, who refused to bow to his power. And yet Emily had held her ground. She had laughed at his arrogance, teased him about his obsession with control, and called him out when he was being insufferable. And God, he had loved it. But for all their chemistry, their undeniable attraction, there had been shadows lurking in the background, whispers, rumors, people who didn't want this marriage to happen, people who would do anything to see them fall apart. And Khalid? Khalid had enemies. Some were known, others hiding in plain sight. The engagement had been controversial from the start. His family had questioned it, his advisors had warned him, and his ex-fiancée? Oh, she had made sure to turn his entire world against Emily. She's not one of us, Khalid. She's using you. She has a past, and when you find out, you'll regret ever trusting her. But Khalid had dismissed the warnings. He had chosen Emily, despite the odds. He had defended her, fought for her, claimed her as his own. And when she finally said yes, when she agreed to marry him, he had felt invincible. Until today. Until the moment someone he trusted, leaned in and whispered the one thing that shattered everything. She's been lying to you. She has another man. She's been playing you this whole time.
The words sliced through him like a dagger. He had laughed at first, scoffing at the idea that Emily could ever betray him. But then the evidence came. A photograph, a message, a name. And suddenly everything made sense. The hesitations, the secrets, the moments where she had seemed distant. He had been blind, a fool. And now? Now he would show the world that Khalid Al-Fayez was no man's fool. And so when Emily stood before him, looking up at him with those piercing blue eyes, eyes that had once made his heart race, he snapped. The rage, the betrayal, the humiliation, it all exploded in a single moment of blind fury. And with one swift, merciless motion, he struck her.
The moment his hand connected with her cheek, a collective gasp rippled through the crowd. His mother covered her mouth in horror. His father's expression darkened. Some guests turned away, unable to believe what they had just seen. And Emily? She stumbled back, her hand flying to her cheek. But then, something unexpected happened, something Khalid had not anticipated. Emily did not cry, she did not scream, she did not plead for mercy. No, she did something far, far worse.
She smiled.
And in that moment, as the entire room held its breath, Khalid realized something chilling. He had made a grave mistake. Because Emily wasn't afraid, she wasn't shocked, she wasn't humiliated.
No. She had been expecting this. And now it was her turn to speak.
The slap had been loud, brutal, merciless, a declaration of power, a warning to the world that Khalid Al-Fayez would not be made a fool of. But as the echoes of his fury faded into the grand wedding hall, something unexpected happened, something terrifying.
Emily smiled *.
A slow, knowing, almost wicked smile. Not the reaction of a woman who had just been humiliated in front of hundreds of powerful elites. Not the reaction of someone who had just been accused of betrayal. No, this was the smile of someone who had been waiting for this moment. The room, once filled with gasps and murmurs, fell into a stunned, uneasy silence. And then Emily spoke. "Oh, Khalid, you poor, poor man." Her voice was soft, too soft, and that terrified him more than if she had screamed. There was no fear, no desperation, just a chilling calmness that sent a shiver down the spines of everyone in the room. "You actually believed them, didn't you?"
Khalid stiffened. A flicker of doubt crept into his chest, but he shoved it down. He had proof, didn't he? The messages, the photos, the whispered warnings. It all made sense.
But then Emily tilted her head, studying him. And what she said next made his blood run cold. "Do you even know who started this lie, Khalid? Do you know who whispered those poisonous words into your ear? Or were you just so desperate to believe the worst about me that you didn't bother to check?" The crowd tensed. People exchanged uneasy glances. The whispers started again, but now they were different, suspicious, curious. Khalid clenched his jaw. His body was rigid, his hands curling into fists. "Enough," he growled. "You can play your games, but I saw the proof. I know the truth." Emily's smile widened. Mocking now. Dangerous. "Oh, really? Then tell me, my dear husband." She took a slow step closer, her wedding gown trailing like a shadow behind her. "If you knew the truth, why is the person who sent you those messages looking a little too nervous right now?" Khalid's eyes flickered toward the crowd, and that's when he saw it. His cousin, his own flesh and blood, the man who had sworn loyalty to him, was pale, eyes darting around the room, sweat beading on his forehead, and beside him, Khalid's former fiancée, her hands trembling, lips parted as if she was praying that Emily would stop speaking. But Emily didn't stop. No, she was just getting started. Should I tell them, Khalid? Should I tell everyone here the real story about how your dear cousin and your bitter ex-fiancé tried to frame me, how they created fake messages, staged photos, spun a beautiful little tale just to turn you against me? Should I tell them how you, the great Khalid Al-Fayez, fell for it without even questioning a thing? The guests gasped. Eyes turned to the accused. Suspicion flared like wildfire. And Khalid? His heart dropped, because deep inside, something was telling him. Emily was right.
"You fool," Emily whispered, her voice laced with disappointment. "You let them play you. You let them make you their puppet. And in the end, you did exactly what they wanted. You destroyed the one person who was truly on your side."
Khalid staggered, not physically, but internally. His mind was spinning. Had he been manipulated? Had his rage made him blind? But before he could process the full weight of his mistake, Emily delivered the final merciless blow. She reached up and removed her wedding ring.
And then, without a single tear, without a moment of hesitation, she tossed it to the ground at his feet.
"You don't deserve me, Khalid." The silence was deafening. "And now," she added, turning toward the grand exit doors. And as the stunned, humiliated millionaire watched his bride walk away, a sleek, black mystery car pulled up outside. The doors opened, and a man stepped out. Someone powerful, someone unknown. Emily smirked.
And for the first time in his life, Khalid knew what it felt like to lose everything.
The diamond ring lay motionless on the marble floor, catching the light like a shattered dream. Khalid stared at it, his entire body frozen, his mind spiraling into chaos. He was Khalid Al-Fayez, a man who built empires, crushed enemies, controlled fate itself. And yet, in one night, in front of hundreds of guests, he had been outplayed, exposed, humiliated. Emily was gone. And worse? She hadn't left alone. Outside, the sleek black Rolls-Royce purred like a silent predator. The doors had opened, and stepping out was a man no one in the room had ever seen before. Tall, sharp, unshaken, he radiated power, the kind of power that wasn't bought, but earned. And the way Emily walked toward him, the way she smiled, as if she had been waiting for this moment, that was what broke Khalid.
His fists clenched, his vision blurred. Who was he? Who was this man that Emily had walked toward with such confidence, without so much as a glance back at the husband who had just slapped her in front of the world? Khalid stormed forward, his chest rising and falling in rapid, uneven breaths. But just as he reached the grand doors of the palace, ready to demand answers, to drag Emily back if he had to, his own guards stepped in his way.
"Sir," one of them hesitated. We can't allow this." Khalid's rage exploded. "Move!" His voice was low, dangerous, the sound of a man seconds away from destruction. But the guards didn't move.
Instead, they shifted uneasily, glancing towards something or someone behind him.
Khalid turned sharply, and his stomach dropped. His father stood at the edge of the hall, arms crossed, face carved from stone. His mother, who had once doted on Emily, who had insisted she would make the perfect wife, now looked away, as if ashamed. The guests? Oh, they were watching. All of them. Some whispered, some gawked, but most simply stared at Khalid with pity. Because they knew. They knew he had just made the greatest mistake of his life. And then his father finally spoke.
"Let her go, Khalid."
The words hit like a sledgehammer.
Let her go.
Khalid's breath caught in his throat. Let her go, let her go, as if she was just another business deal gone wrong, as if he hadn't just watched her walk into the arms of a man who looked like he belonged in his world. A man who even now was watching Khalid through the tinted windows of the Rolls-Royce and smirking. That smirk? That was a declaration of war. A message.
You lost.
The car door closed, the engine revved, and just like that, Emily was gone. The hours after the wedding were a blur. The guests left in silence. The scandal spread like wildfire. Social media exploded. Every angle of the slap, every close-up of Emily's reaction, every screenshot of Khalid's cousin and ex-fiancé looking guilty as sin. Memes, headlines, late-night talk show jokes. His humiliation became entertainment. Billionaire groom slaps bride, but instantly regrets it. Arab tycoon destroyed at his own wedding. Watch her walk away. Emily's revenge? Who was the man she left with? Khalid stopped reading after the 5th headline. He had never cared for social media, but this was inescapable. His name wasn't just trending, it was being dragged through the mud. And it wasn't just online. Investors called, business partners hesitated, his company's stock dropped. Even his own board, men who had once feared him, were now whispering about damage control. And the worst part? The enemy wasn't outside. The enemy was within. "We need to talk," his father's voice cut through the thick silence of Khalid's penthouse office. "Now!" Khalid barely looked up. His fingers drummed against the desk, jaw tight, mind spinning. Not now.
Oh yes, now.
Khalid's eyes snapped up. His father was never one to raise his voice, never one to interfere in Khalid's personal affairs. But tonight he wasn't the calculating businessman who had raised an empire. Tonight, he was a father staring at the son who had just ruined himself. "You were played, Khalid." His father's voice was low, sharp. "Not just by your cousin, not just by your ex-fiancée, but by her." Khalid's blood boiled. "No." His voice was ice. "Emily didn't set this up. She didn't betray me." "Didn't she?" His father cut him off. "Then tell me this. Why didn't she fight back? Why didn't she cry or beg or even try to prove her innocence?" Khalid's throat went dry. "She wanted you to slap her, Khalid. She wanted this to happen."
Khalid's mind reeled. Number? No, that wasn't possible. Emily had been shocked when he hit her, hadn't she? She had looked at him with pain in her eyes, hadn't she?
But now, sitting in the ruins of his own making, doubt creeped in. Had she planned this?
Think, his father pressed. Who was that man, Khalid? The one she left with? Because I'll tell you this much, he wasn't just some stranger. Khalid's pulse pounded, his hands curled into fists.
He needed answers. He needed Emily. But more than anything, he needed to know if the woman he had just let walk away had been his greatest love or his greatest enemy. Sleep? Khalid didn't know what that was anymore. Food? Tasteless? Business? A distraction at best. His mind was a battlefield, and the only war that mattered was the one raging inside him, because for the first time in his life, Khalid Al-Fayez wasn't sure if he was the predator or the prey. Emily haunted him. Not in the way a lost love lingers in the heart. No, this was different. This was torment. This was an obsession, a poison, an itch beneath his skin that refused to be scratched, because Khalid could handle betrayal. He could handle losing money, losing reputation, even losing an empire. But what he couldn't handle was not knowing the truth. Had he destroyed the one woman who actually loved him? Or had he played right into the hands of a mastermind? And worse, who was the man she left with?
Khalid had enemies, too many to count, but none of them had ever gotten this close. None of them had ever walked right into his world and stolen something that belonged to him. Because make no mistake, Emily was his, whether she wanted to be or not.
The first lead, a name that changes everything.
Find her.
That was the only command Khalid gave his men. No excuses, no delays, no price too high. Days passed, then a week, then two, and every second that ticked by chipped away at his sanity. His world had moved on, the media had found new scandals, business deals demanded his attention, and his cousin and ex-fiancée had vanished into irrelevance. But Khalid? Khalid was a man possessed. And then a call changed everything. "Sir, we have a name." Khalid's breath stilled. He turned, gripping the edge of his desk, knuckles white. "Say it." Adrian Black. Silence. And then Khalid let out a slow, chilling laugh. Of course. The name wasn't new to him. No, it was a name whispered in exclusive circles, a name that belonged to a man who operated in shadows. A ghost in high society, ruthless, calculated, untouchable. Adrian Black wasn't just anyone. He was the one man Khalid never wanted to owe a debt to. The one man even billionaires feared crossing. And Emily? She had left with him. "You've done well," Khalid said, his voice like steel. "Now tell me, where is he?" The confrontation. Two titans collide. The private jet landed in Monaco under the cover of darkness. Khalid didn't travel with an entourage this time. No reporters, no grand entrances, just him and the storm brewing inside his chest. Adrian Black wasn't hiding. No, men like him never had to. His presence was an unspoken warning, his reputation a shield sharper than any blade. And right now, he was exactly where he wanted to be. Khalid found him in a high-rise penthouse, seated in a leather chair, a glass of whiskey in his hand. Relaxed, unbothered, waiting, as if he knew Khalid was coming. "Took you long enough," Adrian mused, swirling his drink. "I expected you a week ago." Khalid didn't waste time with pleasantries. His gaze swept the room, searching for her. "Where is she?" Adrian smirked. "That's the first thing you ask? Not even a hello? I'm hurt." Khalid's patience snapped. He strode forward, voice low, deadly.
"Don't play games with me, Black. I don't have the time."
"Oh, but you do," Adrian mused, leaning back. "Because if you really wanted Emily back, you wouldn't be asking me where she is. You'd be asking why she left you in the first place."
Khalid stiffened. His fists clenched at his sides. "She didn't leave. I let her go." Adrian laughed. A cold, knowing laugh. "Is that what helps you sleep at night?" Khalid lunged, but Adrian moved first. In a blink, the whiskey glass was gone, a gun was drawn, and the barrel was pressed right against Khalid's chest. The room fell into deadly silence.
"You think I'm your enemy," Adrian said softly, too softly. "But Khalid, if I were your enemy, you wouldn't have made it through the door." Khalid didn't move, his eyes locked onto Adrian's, a silent battle waging between two men who never lost. "You still haven't answered my question." His voice was deadly calm. "Where is Emily?" Adrian tilted his head. "That's the wrong question, Khalid." Khalid exhaled sharply. "Then what's the right one?" Adrian's smirk returned, sharp, taunting, victorious. "Are you ready for the truth?" Khalid's heart pounded, because for the first time since that night, since the slap, since the ring had hit the floor, he realized Khalid had faced wars in business, torn apart competitors, and crushed billion-dollar deals with nothing but a single signature. But this was different. This wasn't a battle of wealth. It was a war of the mind, and for the first time, he wasn't sure if he was the hunter or the hunted. Adrian Black leaned back in his chair, still holding the gun as if it were a mere accessory. His smirk, annoying, infuriating. But beneath it was something worse. Pity.
"You think I stole Emily from you?" Adrian said, his voice cool, effortless. "That she ran to me because she wanted revenge, or maybe that I was just a better man?" Khalid's jaw clenched. "Spit it out, Black." "Fine." Adrian exhaled and set the gun down on the glass table between them. "She didn't leave you for me, Khalid. She left because she was never meant to be yours in the first place." Khalid's breath stalled. A low chuckle escaped him, dark, humorless.
You expect me to believe that? After everything?
"Believe what you want," Adrian shrugged. "But here's the truth. You were a distraction, a pawn in a much bigger game. Emily played her part perfectly. And you? You walked straight into it." Khalid's fists clenched. "Lies!" "Oh?" Adrian's brow lifted. "Then let me ask you this. Did you ever really know who she was?" Khalid opened his mouth. Stopped. The words wouldn't come. Because suddenly, the memories hit like a tidal wave. The red flags Khalid ignored.
Emily had always been too perfect. From the moment they met, everything had fallen into place too easily. She never questioned his wealth, never hesitated at his demands. She adapted too fast, too seamlessly, like she already knew how to navigate his world. And then there were the disappearances, the unexplained phone calls, the times when she seemed distracted, like she was thinking 10 steps ahead while he was still enjoying the moment. Khalid had brushed it off, convinced himself it was nothing. Because love made even the sharpest men blind. And now, Adrian Black was tearing those illusions apart. "She played you, Khalid," Adrian continued, watching the billionaire's mask crack. "Every touch, every smile, every whispered promise, it was all part of a plan. And the best part? You made it easy for her." Khalid shot up from his seat, sending his chair crashing against the marble floor. His pulse thundered, his vision darkened at the edges. "If you don't tell me the truth—" "The truth?" Adrian stood too, stepping forward, voice deadly now. "Fine. Here it is." He leaned in, his next words slicing through Khalid's chest like a dagger. "Emily was never yours, she was mine, and before that, she belonged to someone far more dangerous than either of us." Khalid's world tilted. "What?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "What the hell are you saying?" "I'm saying," Adrian smirked, "you didn't lose a wife that night. You lost a spy." Who was Emily, really? And what was she after? Khalid had thought betrayal was painful, but this was something else, a violation. His life, his heart, his empire, all had been a stage for a performance he never even knew he was watching. "You're lying," he bit out, though his voice lacked the conviction it should have had. "Am I?" Adrian's smirk deepened. "Then tell me, why do you think I let you walk in here alive?" Khalid stiffened. His mind raced. What did that mean? Why was Adrian so calm? And more importantly, where the hell was Emily now? Khalid wasn't a man easily shaken. He had built an empire from nothing, survived betrayals that would have crushed weaker men,
and walked through fire without flinching. But right now, the ground beneath him felt like it was cracking apart, and Adrian Black was standing there, watching, smirking, enjoying the unraveling of Khalid Al-Fayez.
You expect me to believe Emily was a spy? Khalid's voice was deadly, but even as he spoke, something inside him whispered a warning. What if it's true? Adrian laughed, slow and amused, like a man who already knew how this would end.
Oh, Khalid, believe me, I wouldn't waste my time lying to you. He stepped closer, his blue eyes gleaming. But the real question is, who do you think she was working for? Khalid clenched his jaw. His mind raced through every possibility, but the truth was simple. He didn't know. And that terrified him more than anything.
Tell me. The words were low, sharp, edged with a promise of violence.
I could? Adrian shrugged. But where's the fun in that? You're a smart man. Figure it out.
Khalid's patience snapped. In a flash, he grabbed Adrian by the collar, slamming him against the marble wall. The impact rattled the glass shelves behind them, but Adrian didn't even flinch. He just smiled. Temper, temper. Say her name again like she belongs to you, and I swear... Swear what? Adrian cut him off, his voice dropping to a whisper. You'll kill me? Then what? You still won't have her.
Khalid's grip tightened. His knuckles turned white. But deep down, he knew Adrian was right.
Emily was gone. Not stolen. Not taken. She had left by choice. And worse? She had left him in pieces. The hidden past. Who was Emily before she became his bride? Khalid finally let go, stepping back, breathing hard. His mind was a hurricane of questions, but one rose above all the noise. Who was she before me? His voice was raw now, stripped of power, stripped of control, because that's what she had taken from him. Control. Adrian smirked. But this time, there was something else in his eyes. Pity. You don't want to know. Khalid's blood boiled. You don't get to decide that. Adrian exhaled, then turned toward the window, staring at the city lights below. He was quiet for a long moment, then finally spoke. Emily Chang.
Khalid's heart stopped.
Chang. Not Emily Al-Fayez, not even Emily Black. Chang. A name he hadn't heard before, a name that didn't belong to him, a name that... No, he murmured. That's impossible. Oh, it's very possible, Adrian muttered. He turned back to face Khalid, crossing his arms. Emily wasn't some lost girl who fell in love with an Arab billionaire. She wasn't a helpless woman caught between two powerful men. No, she was always powerful. More than you, more than me. Khalid's world tilted.
You're lying, he said, but his voice lacked its usual steel. Am I? Adrian smirked again, but this time it wasn't taunting. It was almost amused. Then tell me, Khalid, have you ever actually looked into her past? Or were you too blinded by the way she looked in a wedding dress?
The words hit like a punch to the gut. Because no, he hadn't. He had assumed, believed what she told him, trusted her. And now he felt like a fool. What was she after? Khalid demanded. Me! My money! Revenge!
Adrian let out a low chuckle. You still don't get it, do you? He stepped closer, lowering his voice. It was never about you.
Khalid's pulse roared in his ears. Then what? Power, Adrian said simply. Not yours, not mine. Something much bigger. Khalid's breathing turned shallow. Who does she work for? You're asking the wrong question again, Khalid. Adrian's smile was razor sharp. The question isn't who she works for. He paused, watching Khalid's face shift from rage to realization.
The question is who she's after next. Khalid's blood turned to ice because suddenly it wasn't about him anymore. And that meant only one thing. Emily was still out there, moving, planning, and whoever her next target was.
They had no idea what was coming. Khalid stood frozen, every nerve in his body screaming. Adrian Black had spoken, but the words didn't make sense, not yet. How could they? The woman he had loved, the woman he thought he knew, had she been playing him this whole time? Had she been using him as a stepping stone to something bigger? But Adrian wasn't done yet. Oh no, he hadn't even come close to finishing his story. "You're still thinking too small," Adrian said, his voice like cold silk. "This isn't just about power. Not anymore." Khalid's eyes narrowed, his heart pounded in his chest like a drum. He was this close to figuring it all out. His empire, his life, his betrayal. It was all leading somewhere, but where? Adrian took a step forward, his words dripping with a wicked satisfaction. "You see, Emily wasn't after your money, Khalid. She wasn't after revenge, and she sure as hell wasn't after your heart. No, what Emily really wanted was something much more valuable." Khalid clenched his fists, his mind racing, but his voice barely a whisper. "What could possibly be more valuable than my empire?"
Adrian grinned, the kind of grin that made the hairs on the back of Khalid's neck stand up.
"It's not what she wants from you, it's what she wants from the world."
Khalid's blood ran cold. The world? What was he talking about?
"She's not just a woman, Khalid. She's a player. A piece on a much larger board. The kind of player who moves in silence, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And when she does, she doesn't just win the game, she changes the entire system." Khalid's mind spun. He had never been good at chess, but he knew this much. If Emily was the queen, he had been nothing but a pawn, a distraction, a small part of a larger plan, and he had been too blind to see it.
Adrian's eyes gleamed as he leaned in, his voice low, almost a whisper.
"Emily is not just a spy, Khalid. She's part of something far bigger than either of us. She's working with people who have the power to reshape countries, to influence governments, to tear down empires and build new ones in their place." Khalid's chest tightened. He felt the walls closing in, suffocating him with the weight of the truth. "She's after control, Khalid. And she knows that the only way to control the world is to control the men who think they own it."
Khalid couldn't breathe. Control the men who thought they owned the world? She had been playing him. "And you?" Adrian continued, his smile turning into something almost predatory. "You were the perfect tool, the perfect distraction. You were so focused on your pride, your empire, your riches, you didn't see the strings being pulled around you." Khalid's head spun. His empire, his fortune, everything he had built, it had all been a smokescreen. She had used him to get to something much darker, much bigger. And now she had disappeared without a trace. But the worst part?
She was already 5 steps ahead. The ultimate betrayal. Emily's final move. Khalid sat down hard, his mind racing, his world in pieces. Adrian Black was standing over him, looking down with a sense of victory, almost as if he were the one who had won. "You think it's over?" Adrian asked, the smirk still on his face. "Oh no, Khalid. You're just getting started." Khalid's gaze snapped to him. "What are you talking about?" "I'm saying," Adrian said, his tone almost too calm, "you haven't lost everything yet. But you're going to..."
Khalid's eyes narrowed. His hands clenched into fists again. What do you mean? Emily is already out of your reach, but the people she's working with, they have control over far more than you can imagine.
Adrian leaned in closer, his voice dropping even lower. There's a plan, Khalid, a plan that no one, not even you, can stop. And once it's set in motion, everything you've ever built will crumble.
Khalid felt his stomach tighten. This wasn't just about a woman he had loved. It was about something far more dangerous, something far more devastating. He didn't just lose Emily, he had lost the game.
Adrian took a step back, his grin widening. You want to find her? Khalid nodded, his voice tight with determination. Tell me where she is. She's already where you'll never find her. Adrian's eyes flashed with a mixture of pity and amusement. She's gone, Khalid, and you? You're going to have to deal with the fallout.
Khalid stared at him, the weight of the situation finally crashing down on him. He wasn't just fighting for Emily. He was fighting for everything he had ever known. And it wasn't enough to just chase after her. No, this time he had to fight the system she had embedded herself in. And that was something Khalid had never been prepared for.
This game isn't over yet, Adrian said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of something much darker than Khalid had ever imagined. But I'll leave you with this. The first rule in a game like this is simple. Khalid's heart pounded. His mind screamed at him to get out, to take action. But he stayed, rooted to the spot. What rule? The first rule is, you never see the enemy coming. Khalid's pulse raced, the meaning of Adrian's words sinking deep into his chest like a blade. And in that moment, Khalid knew the war was just beginning. But this time, it wasn't just about Emily. It was about surviving the game she had started. And surviving meant becoming the very thing he feared the most. Khalid sat in stunned silence, the weight of Adrian's words pressing down on him like a ton of bricks. Everything had changed. What had once been a love story, a fairy tale at least in Khalid's mind, was now a horrifying web of lies, manipulation, and hidden agendas. Adrian Black had taken the truth and shredded it into a million pieces, leaving Khalid to pick up the wreckage of his life. You think it's over? Adrian asked, the smugness in his voice almost unbearable. Oh no, Khalid, you're just getting started. The words echoed in Khalid's mind like an incessant drumbeat, growing louder, more frantic. He wanted to scream, to lash out, but he could only sit there, staring at Adrian, his heart racing in his chest. What did he mean? Was this some twisted game that Adrian was playing with him?
I'm saying, Adrian said, his voice lowering to a dangerous whisper, you haven't lost everything yet. But you're going to... The confidence in Adrian's voice was unnerving. Khalid could feel the ground beneath him shifting. His empire, the legacy he had spent years building, was suddenly in danger. Not from a rival businessman, not from a political enemy, but from the woman he had married. The woman who had claimed to love him. Khalid leaned forward, his hands clenched into fists, his jaw tightening. What do you mean?
Emily is already out of your reach, Adrian continued, his words like daggers. But the people she's working with, they have control over far more than you can imagine. Khalid's mind spun as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The mysterious calls, the secret meetings, the way Emily had always seemed to know more than she let on. She hadn't been a helpless woman in love with a rich man. She had been playing a dangerous game of her own. There's a plan, Khalid, Adrian said, his voice now dangerously calm. A plan that no one, not even you, can stop. And once it's set in motion, everything you've ever built will crumble.
Khalid's eyes went wide. He had been the one in control. He had been the one with the power, with the wealth, with the connections. How could this be happening? How could she have orchestrated this whole thing?
Adrian stepped back, his smile wide, almost predatory. He was enjoying this, enjoying watching Khalid unravel before him. But the worst part? He was telling the truth. "You want to find her?" Adrian asked, his voice almost bored now.
Khalid's fists tightened. "Tell me where she is." Adrian laughed softly, almost pityingly. "She's already where you'll never find her?"
Khalid's blood ran cold. She was gone. The woman he had loved, the woman he had trusted, was already out of his reach. She was playing him like a fiddle, and now he had to deal with the fallout.
"She's gone, Khalid," Adrian said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of a cold finality. "And you? You're going to have to deal with the fallout." Khalid's heart pounded in his chest as the reality of the situation settled in. He wasn't just dealing with a lost love, he was dealing with a scheme far beyond his comprehension. This wasn't just about love, this was about power.
And Emily had taken it all, right out from under him. "This game isn't over yet," Adrian continued, his voice still calm, still unsettlingly assured. "But I'll leave you with this. The first rule in a game like this is simple." Khalid's eyes locked onto Adrian's. "What rule?" "The first rule is, you never see the enemy coming." Adrian's words hit Khalid like a hammer. "The second rule?" He smiled, his eyes glinting dangerously. "You never see them leave." Khalid felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. He had been blind to the truth, and now there was no turning back. The game was already in motion, and the real question was, what was Emily's next move? Khalid's pulse raced, but something inside him shifted. He couldn't sit back and let this happen. He couldn't let Emily get away with everything. He had to find her. He had to stop her before it was too late.
"So what happens now?" Khalid asked, his voice filled with a mix of anger and desperation. "Where do I go from here?" "You go to war," Adrian replied coldly, his smile never fading. "Because believe me, Khalid, you're not the only one looking for her."
The finality in Adrian's words made Khalid's stomach churn. He knew then that the woman he thought he knew, Emily, was part of a larger, more dangerous world than he had ever imagined. And the worst part? He didn't know if he could survive it. Emily had always been a woman of mystery, but now she was something else entirely. She was a ghost, a shadow moving through the dark corners of the world, pulling strings, manipulating events, orchestrating her escape from Khalid's grasp, and he didn't even know how it had happened. But the worst part, he couldn't stop her. He couldn't even keep up. Because Emily was already 5 steps ahead, and Khalid, he was just another player in her game. As the pieces of her plan came together, Khalid realized the most chilling truth of all. He wasn't just fighting to get Emily back, he was fighting to survive. Because when Emily moved, she didn't just take things from him, she tore them apart. And Khalid, he had no idea what she was about to destroy next,